Hello, 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 hello.
দাঁড়া একটা দেখতে দে ঝুঁকে যাচ্ছে একটুখানি এগিয়ে মিটে গেল।
and occupy
The convocation will commence in a few minutes. Here are a few announcements in order. Please switch off your cell phones and keep it switched off till the program ends. The program is being streamed live over YouTube, so naturally all are requested to maintain silence. During the award of degrees and awards, each batch should start assembling on the right-hand side of the dais as soon as the president starts promulgating the proclamation of the degree or diploma relevant for the particular degree or diploma program. After receiving the degree or diploma, please do not congregate below the dais for photos. Arrangements have been made for photos to be taken for each awardee by the Institute's photography unit. These photographs would be uploaded for the 2 days in the ISI website. Please wear your mask all the time and maintain a distance of at least 1 meter with others all the time. Thank you.
প্লাস্টিকটাই দাও, অন্তত নেই মামাচ্ছে কেন বলো, আমি পাঠাচ্ছি, তুমি একটা দিয়ে দাও, তারপর করো। এই চন্দন, পুষ্পেন্দুর কাছে যা। এই বড় স্যানিটাইজারও তো আছে কিছু, ওটা ওখানটা রেখে দাও, আর ওই মাছটা ওখানে, ওই যে হারমোনিয়ামের পাশে।
Please rise for the academic procession. Please rise for the academic procession. Thank you.
I declare the 55th Convocation of the Indian Statistical Institute open. The Chairman of ISI, Dr. Ashok Lahiri, the Director, Professor Bandyopadhyay, the Dean, Professor Sengupta, faculty members, graduating students. It is my privilege and honor to speak to you today as the President of the ISI at this 55th Convocation. I am no mathematician, but the number 55, I understand, is special in many different ways. It's the sum of the first 10 positive integers. It is a Fibonacci number. It's a triangular number. It's a doubly triangular number. It's a square pyramidal number. It's a special number. All numbers are special, but the number 55 is more special than many others. Extremely special, even though one should not use the word magical. The ISI is also extremely, extremely special. It is the only institute of its kind, not only in India, anywhere across the globe. Its faculty members, its students have distinguished themselves and have thereby also brought laurels to ISI. And this is not just a matter of history and legacy. As we will soon learn from the annual review presented by the director, that bit of bringing laurels to the institute is true even today. And when you pass out, you carry with you that burden of expectations in terms of what you're expected to do as students graduating from ISI. It is the 55th Convocation. It is difficult to date. Not difficult, there are many different ways to date the birth of ISI. But in some ways, it can be dated to 1931. So in that sense, the ISI is 90 years old. But in some other ways, it can be dated to the year 1921, because 1921 is in some ways when the seed of ISI was sown. What am I talking about? I am talking about Professor Prashanta Chandra Mahalanobish's work on the Anglo-Indian community of Kolkata, which was done in 1921, although the paper was actually published in 1922. But I think in some ways, the seeds of ISI were sown in 1921. But 1921, exactly 100 years ago, gives us a sense of déjà vu, because in 1921, the world was recovering from the impact of the Spanish flu. Information then is not what it is now, so we don't know that much about the Spanish flu, but subsequent research has shown that the Spanish flu left lasting impacts in terms of what it did to human development. And COVID and the resultant lockout and the uncertainty associated with COVID is still in the midst of us, which is why this particular convocation is happening amidst such difficult circumstances. A little while ago, we heard a mantra sung, a mantra from the Rig Veda. Sangachvadhang sang vadodhang. And it also said, Samani va akuti samana hridayani va. And all of us are united in our inclinations. All of us are united in the wishes in our hearts that this uncertainty due to COVID and the lockdown should pass. If you cast your minds back to the end of March, there were many models which forecast gloom and doom for India. There are modelers, often in the West, who are prominent on television media, in print media, saying that the number of infections in India would touch 700 million. The number of deaths in India would be 30 million. By any possible metric, India has fared reasonably well, especially in comparison with other countries in the world, particularly if you normalize for population. Yes, there is still uncertainty. Yes, we do not know about, we as statisticians, you do not know, you do not have samples to know about the efficacy of the vaccine. You do not have information about what will happen to a virus that mutates. In terms of economic indicators, there are signs that the economy is recovering, but in some ways, the effects of the lockdown are still there, particularly in sectors where there is a human-to-human interface. Hence, when you go out into the world, when you pass beyond these portals, the world is still one of uncertainty. Usually, in customary usage, we do not distinguish between the words risk and uncertainty. But ever since Frank Knight, economists have distinguished between risk and uncertainty. Risk is a situation where at least you know the probabilities of events. Uncertainty is a situation where you do not know what the probabilities associated with various events are. Had you graduated 2 years ago, you would have confronted risk. Today, as you graduate, you confront not risk, you confront uncertainty. This convocation, the 55th, is occurring in the midst of this uncertainty. You have been taught a lot by your teachers. You are equipped with all the skills to face this uncertainty. To the best of my knowledge, the first recorded convocation address anywhere in the world is from the Taittiriya Upanishad, the Taittiriya Samhita. And I hope someday you read it, because the Shiksha Valli section of the Taittiriya Upanishad almost takes you through entering an educational institution and graduating. The first Anuvak is like an inaugural event when you join a program, then you go through the course structure, and in the 11th Anuvak, you have the teacher addressing the student almost in a convocation address. You're familiar with some of these terms, you may not know where it is originally from. Matri Deva Bhava, Pitri Deva Bhava, Atithi Deva Bhava, Satyang Vada, Dharmang Chara, all of this is from the 11th Anuvak. And in the 12th Anuvak, the student responds. So it's like the pledge that you take at the end of the convocation. Again, you're familiar with those words, except you might not know where they are from. Sahana avatu, sahana bhunaktu, sahavirjam karavavahai, tejasina adhitumastu, ma vidvitshavahai. All of this is the students responding. I think there is a metaphor there. And the metaphor, Taittiriya, because they learnt in the form of Tittira birds, the partridge. I think there is a metaphor there that you learn from everyone. Today is not the end of learning. You continue to learn. You learn from Tittira's partridges. You learn as you go out in the rest of the world. And the rest of the world, unless I am wrong, the student festival of ISI Kolkata is called Integration. And the student festival of ISI Bangalore is called Chaos, unless I am wrong. And that's a metaphor for what is going on, because plagues, epidemics throughout the world have happened through cross-border human movements. So the integration is part of that, and the resultant chaos is also part of that. Dharmang Chara. We are not talking about dharma in the sense of moksha dharma, metaphysics, spirituality, the other world, which is the reason the word dharma is very difficult to translate into English. Ignoring aspects of metaphysics, dharma is what we do in our daily lives as we see fit. There is a section in the Mahabharata which is called Apath Dharma. Dharma in time of calamities. And in some sense, what we confront today, because of the COVID and resultant outcomes, is like Apath Dharma, which are deviations from normal templates of dharma, not only for the king, the counterpart of today's government, but also for individuals. Because you go out in the midst of this uncertainty, I will not say, may you get what you want, because you won't. Instead, as a benediction, I will say, may you want what you get. May you find that dharma inside you. Two words are often used. One is shuk, or in Bengali shuk, happiness. And the other one is shanti, which is peace. The two are not the same. Quite often when we look for shuk or happiness, we are looking for shuk or happiness in terms of external objects, external relationships, transient objects, temporary objects. The shanti, the serenity, is inside you. And as the Bhagavad Gita says, Ashantasya kutah shukham. If you do not have that serenity inside you, you will not get happiness. So at some point, I hope you will reflect and find that destiny inside you, find that serenity inside you, find that dharma inside you, find that learning inside you, and find that destiny inside you. Finally, in conclusion, particularly this is because this is Kolkata, I cannot resist quoting or paraphrasing a bit from Swami Vivekananda's Swadesh Mantra, translated into English as Modern India. I don't really have to translate, so I'm stating it in Bengali. The meaning is obvious, and I'm paraphrasing a bit. He Bharat, ei Paranubad, ei Paranukaron, ei Paramukhapekkha, ei Dasashulab Manushikata, এই মতো সম্বল করিয়া তুমি বিশ্বে উচ্চ পদাধিকার লাভ করিবে। And towards the end, হে গৌরীনাথ, হে জগদম্বে, আমার দুর্বলতা, আমার অক্ষমতা দূর করো, আমায় মানুষ করো। That is the future that you are headed towards. In Dante's Divine Comedy, there is a description of going through 9 concentric circles of hell, going to purgatory and then reaching paradise. Purgatory has the notion of purging. The Sanskrit word, the Indian word, tapas, is sometimes translated as austerities. It does not, the word austerities does not capture the nuance of scorching, heating, purifying. The world, India, all of us individually are going through this process of purification. You also face that. Nonetheless, as you pass through this portal, there is a great future waiting for you. And always remember, the burden of being a graduate of ISI will always be on your shoulders, and you must always remember that. It is now my honor to request Dr. Ashok Lahiri, the chairman of the ISI Council, to address the gathering. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. That was an eloquent lecture, very appropriate. Director Bandopadhyay, Dean, professors, distinguished guests, and dear students. I'm delighted to be here for the 55th Convocation. I have been to this campus perhaps 6 dozen times. But that was much earlier in my younger days. Since I joined the ISI Council, this is my first visit. This is the first time I'm here. COVID or no COVID, I was determined not to miss today's August ceremony. The President has already told you 55, the magical number 55. I didn't know about that. Thank you, Vivek, for that 55 number speciality. How could I miss today when you're all crossing an important milestone in your career? The day you, with all your training that you've received at the Indian Statistical Institute and with your degree, move on to climb greater heights. You have received your training in mathematics, statistics, quantitative economics, quality reliability and operations research, quality management, library and information science. The country needs people with your expertise. The expertise that you've acquired and will acquire with further education and research is essential for the country, whether it's agriculture, for example, to find out improvements in yields or output of different crops, what is the response to various inputs, agricultural practices for different crops, fruits, vegetables, livestock, or monitoring the environment, or maintaining the quality of our industrial products, or for that matter, to find out why people voted the way they did in an election. I cannot think of how India, as it marches ahead with development, can do without the kind of expertise that you have acquired. Needless to say, that to maintain rigor and quality of our applied work, we'll need to do a lot of theoretical research. A good backbone of people engaged in theoretical work is essential for quality empirical work. So I'm not by any means saying that you should be doing empirical work only. In terms of economic parameters, we may be a developing or emerging country, but I sincerely believe that in the world of knowledge in general, and mathematics, philosophy, and some of the physical and social sciences, we can be at the very front of the world league. We have the tradition, and we have some 138 crore of us. All we need is a few lakh to lead the intellectual league. I hope to see some of you at the vanguard of the campaign. You have the ability, you have the basic training, and all you need is determination and hard work. An educational institution is built not only by teachers, but also by its students. Your relationship, as the President pointed out, is a permanent one. This may surprise you, but I say this from my more than a dozen years of experience in teaching at the Delhi School of Economics. The questions students ask or comments that they make often enrich the professors as well. Just as it is a privilege for students to have good professors, it is a privilege for professors and the institution to have bright students, and you are some of them. As you graduate and move on, you take with you a lot of ISI ingrained in you, and also leave a bit of you with ISI. What you do and achieve will add to the glory of ISI, and what ISI achieves in the future will fill you with pride and luster to your CV. In years to come, some of you may even be back as professors and research in ISI. Who knows? Maybe 10 years from now, you'll be here. Let me end by saying that it is my privilege to be present on this day when you graduate from ISI. I wish you the very best in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lahiri, the chairman of the ISI Council. May I now request the director, Professor Sanghamitra Bandyopadhyay, to present the annual review.
President of the Indian Statistical Institute, Shri Vivek Debroy, Chairman of the ISI Council, Dr. Ashok Lahiri, Chief Guest of the Convocation, Dr. Swaminathan, Guest of Honor, Professor Peter Bickel, my very dear students, colleagues, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. A very warm welcome to all of you to the 55th Convocation of the Indian Statistical Institute. We are delighted and honored that two very eminent persons have agreed to inspire our graduating students today, albeit through their recorded messages. Dr. Swaminathan has been the Director General of ICMR and the Secretary of the Department of Health Research in the Government of India. She is now the Chief Scientific Officer at the World Health Organization, which is at the center of the international management of COVID-19. Professor Peter Bickel of the University of California at Berkeley is one of the most outstanding statisticians of our times. His fundamental contributions in many areas of statistics, including semi-parametric models, asymptotic theory, machine learning, robustness, and in more recent times, in high-dimensional statistics and in developing models for large-scale biological data analysis, have long-standing impact. We are grateful to Dr. Swaminathan and Professor Bickel for agreeing to be the honored guests of our convocation, thus enabling us to continue our tradition of having some of the very best gracing our graduation ceremony. The year 2020 was a strange one, shaking the world to its core and exposing once again the vulnerabilities of humans against nature. Lives and livelihoods were lost, and economies around the world took a tumble. It was also during these trying times that we saw the scientific community of the entire world come together for a common cause. Data, results, expertise, and experiences were shared worldwide. We also realized the power of technology, which has kept us connected and helped us achieve whatever limited we could. Understandably, the number of scientific activities that we were able to conduct on campus reduced substantially. The second edition of the Young Statistician Meet was held in early January last year. This was followed by a number of events, including a workshop on climate change and disaster management in coastal areas, an Indo-French pre-conference school on algorithms and combinatorics, a workshop on statistical data analysis organized jointly with the Northeastern Hill University, a workshop on emerging role of statistics in anthropology organized jointly with Dibrugarh University, and a few more. The Women's Day program was conducted in March 2020 with dancers Alokananda Roy as the main guest, whose work with convicts is well known. Then the pandemic took charge, and we were locked down in our homes. Thereafter, some events got organized in the online mode, including the June 29th National Statistics Day program, as well as the 90th Foundation Day of the Institute on December 17, 2020. As part of C.R. Rao's birth centenary celebrations, a workshop was organized in the virtual mode on September 10, 2020, his 100th birthday. An online training program on dummy variable models in regression with special emphasis on logit and probit models was organized with participants from India and from some of our neighboring countries as well. The workers of ISI stood by the local community during the lockdown. In collaboration with the local police, ISI Club and ISI Workers Organization organized community lunch for more than 4,000 people over a period of about 3 weeks. In the midst of the lockdown, Cyclone Amphan struck, causing great damage in our Kolkata campus and uprooting a large number of trees. Several colleagues, including the gardeners of the institute, came together to protect the green cover. And with the help of CPWD, many trees were replanted at exemplary speed. Today, many of these trees have grown young shoots. The academic programs also got largely disrupted in the year because of the pandemic. The semester had to be completed online. Getting the foreign students in the International Statistical Education Center back to their countries proved challenging, but with the cooperation of all, things got sorted out. I am delighted to inform you that ISI scientists and students continue to bring national and international recognitions to the Institute. I mention a few here. Our young colleague, Rajat Shubro Hajra, has received the Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar Prize in Mathematical Sciences. Neena Gupta has been selected as TWAS Young Affiliate and has also become a Fellow of the Indian Academy of Sciences. Rahul Roy has been elected Fellow of the Indian National Science Academy. Orunaba Goswami has been elected Fellow of the National Academy of Agricultural Sciences. Saurabh Ghosh has been elected as a Fellow of West Bengal Academy of Science and Technology. Ashish Ghosh has become a Fellow of the International Association for Patent Recognition. Shushmita Surkole has been selected for the IIT Kharagpur Distinguished Alumnus Award. Shiva Atreya has been selected as Editor of Electronic Communications in Probability. He has also served as the Chair of the Program Committee for IMS BPS World Conference in Probability 2020. Sushmita Mitra has become the Chair of the IEEE Kolkata section. B. Suri has been elected as President of the Indian Mathematical Society. Antar Bandopadhyay has been elected as a member of the International Statistical Institute. Parthanil Roy has been selected as the Bernoulli Society Youth Representative. Madhura Swaminathan has been appointed as member, Council of Advisors, World Food Prize, Iowa, USA. Mudit Kapoor has become a member of the committee constituted in Niti Aayog to look into reforms in the data management system in health sector. Dr. Kapoor has also served as a technical advisory group member of a committee constituted in Niti Aayog for National Data Analytics Platform. Farzana Afridi has been selected as the lead academic of the India program of the International Growth Center. E. Somanathan has been selected as the co-editor of the Cambridge University Press journal Environment and Development Economics. Probal Roy Chaudhary has been selected as the chief editor, Indian Growth and Development Review, and also as the editor of the Competition Commission of India Journal on Competition Law and Policy. Our research fellows, Aparajita Khan, Sharup Chattopadhyay, and Tonujit Chakraborty, have won accolades for their respective research results. I am also extremely happy to inform you that one of our distinguished alumnus, Saurabh Chatterjee, has won the Infosys Prize in Mathematical Sciences. Former Director Professor Bimal Roy continues to serve as the chair of the National Statistical Commission. Another former director, Professor Shankar Pal, was conferred the National Science Chair position. We are proud of the achievements and recognitions of all of them. The Institute continues to collaborate with academia, industry, and R&D labs, conducting a large number of sponsored projects and consultancy activities. The major funding agencies are Government of India, Government of West Bengal, DST, SERB, DBT, DRDO, RBI, ICMR, UNESCO, Capital One Services, Quality Council of India, L&T Infotech, and many more. Several memorandums of understanding with national and international organizations, universities, and institutes have been signed. I am profoundly grateful to Dr. Swaminathan and Professor Peter Bickel, who promptly accepted my invitation to address our graduating students on this very important day of their lives. Their words will go a long way in inspiring our students to give their very best in whatever they do. Having Shri Bibek Debroy as the president of the Institute has been a true blessing. He is always there whenever we need him, in our times of joy and in times that are difficult. Dr. Ashok Lahiri, the new chairman of the ISI Council, is on campus as the chairman for the first time. My heartiest welcome, sir, and I hope to be able to lead this institute to greater heights under your sage guidance. My gratitude to Professor Govardhan Mehta, the past chairman of the ISI Council, for his strong leadership in the past 4 years. I take this opportunity to thank Professor Dipti Prasad Mukherjee, Deputy Director, and the former and current deans, Professor Gautam Mukherjee and Professor Debashish Sengupta, respectively, for having accorded immense support in the smooth running of the Institute affairs. Thanks to all the center heads, past and the current professors in charge, Head SQC and OR Division, Associate Deans, the students in charges, Member Secretary Isaac, the Chief Executive Administration and Finance, Brigadier Pandey, and all academic, administrative, and accounts colleagues who have played their roles in the Institute functioning. As I stand at the first convocation of my second tenure as Director ISI, I am hopeful that we will stand united for a common cause, the Indian Statistical Institute, a unique institution created by our beloved professor, the legendary Prashanta Chandra Mahalanobis. To the students who are graduating today, my very best wishes to all of you. May you achieve your dreams in line with what APJ Abdul Kalam had said, may your dreams not let you sleep. on life's journey, please remember to aim higher, to work harder, and to be a better human being. You have been and will remain a part of the ISI family. Give something back to this institute when you can. The institute needs your help. Take care of yourselves and stay safe, healthy, and happy. I wish all of you the very best in your endeavors. Thank you. Jai Hind.
It is now my honor to introduce Dr. Soma Swaminathan, the chief guest. Under normal circumstances, the chief guest and the guest of honor would have been present here, but this convocation is occurring in difficult circumstances. They are abroad, and therefore their video speeches will be played. The director has already mentioned briefly about both Professor Swaminathan and Professor Bickel. Soma Swaminathan is a familiar face and a familiar voice in India, especially in the context of COVID. She is the chief scientist with the WHO, and she has been telling us, she has been telling the world about vaccines, herd immunity, the delivery of vaccination programs, and the possibilities of a vaccine mutating. What some of you may not know is that she is the daughter of the father of the Green Revolution in India, M.S. Swaminathan. She stands in her own right. The only reason I mention her father is because in her childhood, it was trips to her father's lab and experimental wheat fields in developing high-yielding varieties of rice and wheat, which ignited Soma Swaminathan's passion for scientific research. After that, a glittering track record, she topped at the Medicine of Armed Forces Medical College in Pune. She went on to Los Angeles. She has published widely. She is an elected fellow of the US National Academy of Medicine and a fellow of 3 national science academies in India. She has headed many expert groups, has been the recipient of several medals and other awards. Hence, we are all eager to listen to what Soma Swaminathan has to say.
Greetings from the World Health Organization. I'm Soumya Swaminathan, the Chief Scientist. And first of all, I would like to start by congratulating all the graduating students of the Indian Statistical Institute for this year, those who are getting their degrees and going out to pursue their future careers. It's a moment of great excitement for all of you, but also of some anxiety and trepidation, particularly as you're stepping out at a time when there is a global pandemic, when there's a lot of uncertainty out there. But I want to reassure you that along with challenges in life, usually there are opportunities. And this is a time when young people like you can really face up to the challenges that are facing society today as a whole and think about how you can contribute, how you can use your skills to address problems. In fact, in my own life, I find that I have been happiest when I've had a problem that I need to work on and to resolve, which keeps me up at night, which keeps my brain active and thinking, which makes me talk to people about it, work with colleagues, with different people from different parts of society to help solve that problem. So in a way, it is stimulates you to do your best and to come out of a difficult situation. And I would like to spend a little bit of time really describing my own experience over the last year or so at the WHO, where I've been sitting in a sort of a position which has a eagle's eye, you could say, over what's happening across the world. It has been a time of huge challenge. It's been a time that's been very humbling because of the lack of knowledge we had about this virus when we started off early in January 2020. The amazing scientific collaboration and cooperation that I've seen globally across the world in order to develop new tools and technologies, and also learning from the successes and failures that we've seen around the world. So I'd like to touch on some of those aspects. But let me go back to January 2020, when we first heard on the 31st of December 2019 that there was a cluster of atypical pneumonia cases. And of course, the WHO has, through its emergency program, a very well-designed mechanism for focal points in every country, which all report according to the international health regulations to WHO when there is some suspicious activity. In addition to that, we also have ways of collecting data from sources, non-governmental sources, from lay media, from press, which is then looked at by an artificial intelligence algorithm. There are about 9 million of these alerts that come out every month, and then out of that, there are a few hundred of them which need to be further investigated because they seem to be serious. So that's something that goes on day in and day out. And on the 4th of January last year was when the WHO first issued what we call the disease outbreak news to the world, warning people that there was this outbreak, that it looked serious, and that we would be working on it and providing more information. So that's the day that focal points for international health regulations around the world, every country has a focal point, were alerted, and ministries of health actually got into action and started following what was happening in Wuhan. Now, at that time, we knew very little about this virus, but on the 10th of January, Chinese scientists actually published the whole genome sequence, and it was clear that this was a virus that was very similar to the SARS-CoV-1 virus, which caused the severe outbreak in 2003, which also spread around the world, but ultimately was controlled in a matter of 8 months, with about 8,000 people being infected and 800 lives being lost. This virus turns out to be quite different from the SARS-1 in that it's much more easily transmissible. People who don't have symptoms can transmit this virus. It tends to result in super spreader events. So one individual in a particular setting can actually lead to a lot of infections. So research done in India that was published a few months ago showed that 15% of infections were responsible for over 80% of secondary transmission. So we're still trying to understand where and how and when this happens, but it's clear that not everyone is transmitting to others equally. We also know now that most transmission occurs within either households or within settings where people are spending a lot of time together, and especially if it's a closed environment. So we talk about the 3 C's: the closed environment, the close contact with people, and the close contact, the closed environment, and being in close proximity. Now, all of that knowledge actually started coming up over time. So on the 14th of January, when we first put out the technical guidance documents on how countries must start acting to prevent, what surveillance needs to be done, what are the things that need to be done in terms of taking care of patients, the infection prevention and control, all of that was done basing our guidance on other similar respiratory viruses. And this is where the science division that I lead in WHO actually comes into the picture, because we are responsible for quality assurance of all the normative guidance. WHO is a normative agency. We do standards, we do guidance, we do recommendations, and all of that needs to follow a process which is standardized, which is responding to the end user needs. It's timely, it's relevant, it's based on the best available scientific data and evidence. It's quality assured through a review process which is also standardized. make sure that there are no conflicts of interest amongst the members who develop the guidelines, involve the right stakeholders in the discussions. So there is a process which needs to be followed, and we ensure that that's done. We set up a publication review committee which would turn around within 48 hours documents that were being produced, because in an emergency it has to be done quickly, but at the same time we needed to ensure that it meets the standards of rigorous science-based advice. So this is a balancing act always. On the one hand, you have to be fast as possible. On the other hand, you have to ensure that your quality is not suffering. The other major thing we did right in January was convening researchers, academics, as well as the private sector working on new tools. At that time, the first diagnostic test was described on February 12th. This was the RT-PCR test. At that time, there was a huge shortage of reagents, of diagnostics. There were a few companies that were responsible for most of the reagents. And in fact, we had a situation where in the whole continent of Africa, there were only 2 labs that could do this test, in South Africa and Senegal. In India, there was only 1 lab, the National Institute of Virology. But very quickly, of course, this got scaled up in India. Today, I think there are over 2,000 labs, both in the private and public sector, that can do the RT-PCR. And I know that we do approximately 1 million tests a day in India. So that's been a huge expansion of capacity, as well as of manufacturing the reagents and kits that you need within the country. But there was, during February, March, April, global supply shortages, and the supply chains had broken down. And that's when it was really very sad to see the huge number of infections and deaths that occurred among healthcare workers. Globally, 7% of all infections have occurred among healthcare workers. And in the beginning, when there was a shortage of personal protective equipment, we saw a number of deaths among nurses and doctors and other paramedical staff. And this continues because they get exposed a lot more than others. And so we continue to see deaths of healthcare providers, but over time the supply chains have improved. So going back to the science, this global convening led to a research roadmap in February that we prepared, which identified the knowledge gaps and laid out the research priorities, and we divided into 9 thematic areas, starting from the origin of this virus. Which animal did it come from? Most likely, we believe it came from a bat, because it has a very close similarity in the genetic sequence to some bat coronaviruses, and bats have lots of coronaviruses. But how and when and where it jumped into humans, whether there was an intermediate animal or not, that is one whole area of work. And as you know, there's a team now in China that's investigating that. Then there was a team looking at transmission, at epidemiology, at infection prevention and control, at the development of diagnostics, therapeutics, and vaccines, and also social and behavioral research. Very, very important for public health programs. We often think, at least doctors tend to think in a biomedical way of an intervention, whether it's a drug or some other product, but very often for the community to take it up. And especially if it's a behavior change, you ask people to stop smoking. It's not just a question of providing them with the right knowledge or guidance. That often doesn't do the trick. What you have to do to bring about behavior change is much more complex. It requires a multidisciplinary approach. It requires an individualized approach. It requires messaging in different ways. So around that time, we also coined the term infodemic to describe the huge amount of information that is out there, both credible and good information, but also a lot of misinformation, rumors and myths. And we see that continues to occur, all kinds of absolutely outrageous ideas linking the virus with 5G, linking the vaccine with chips being embedded in people and so on, just creating a lot of confusion and fear and anxiety. So while we were working on the science and the guidance and so on, which public health experts can understand and implement, at the same time we had a huge emphasis on communication also to the lay public, to the media. The Director General and several of us would have daily press conferences for the first 3 or 4 months, and following that we now moved to a twice weekly press conference schedule, and this is an opportunity for journalists from around the world to connect and ask questions and then learn about the latest. We do events on Facebook Live. Many of us are active on social media. So that's been a change from the past and really trying to reach out to people. We have a WhatsApp, created a WhatsApp bot which can answer questions in many different languages, including several Indian languages. So we worked with the technology companies, with the social media companies, to ensure, on the one hand, that misinformation was being removed from their websites, and on the other hand, to provide useful and credible and practical information for people. So that has been equally important, I think, in this response. And you see countries that have responded better and that have done better. There are certain characteristics and qualities. The first one, of course, is political will and leadership. And it's often said that countries that have been led by women leaders have done remarkably well. And quoting the example of New Zealand, of Finland, and a few other countries. But what is needed is really a leader who's willing to take on board scientific advice given to him or her by the experts in the country and have a science-based approach. Have humility, have compassion, look at people's problems and understand what they need. It's very easy to tell people you have to go into a 14-day isolation or a 14-day quarantine. But what is not recognized is that it's not everyone who can do that easily. There are people for whom a daily wage is important. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to feed their family. So it's only when governments recognize that and support people to go into isolation, taking care of the family, making sure they have food, making sure they have their essentials, ensuring that the environment you provide is conducive, it's pleasant, is the way to get cooperation. And so the point is really, without engaging the community, without empowering them, without explaining, without getting their buy-in, it's very hard for a massive public health program to be successful. And I think these are lessons that we learn from this pandemic, which we need to apply to other disease control programs. We have many public health priorities. Tuberculosis is something I've worked on all my life. We have 500,000 people who die of TB every year in India, so a much higher death toll than we've had from COVID-19. Luckily, we've kept our mortality rates very low, and that's despite the fact that we have lost 150,000 people, relatively low compared to what some of the other countries have faced in terms of deaths per million population or even cases per million. So we have huge public health problems like non-communicable diseases, including hypertension, diabetes, all going up, mental health disorders, and we need to take the lessons from handling the pandemic into those areas. And I think one major lesson that we've seen is that countries that have invested in public health and primary health care over a period of time, so this doesn't happen overnight. This needs to be a sustained investment in infrastructure, in human resources, in data systems, in digital health, in supply chain, logistics, in continuous training, and in the community engagement component, in regulatory systems, in building institutional strengths and capacities. All of this needs to be in place in order for the system to be able to really respond effectively when there's a sudden emergency. And so this is also what we call resilient health systems that should have the capacity to withstand the shock and still be able to do a good job. So we did a survey, in the summer looking at essential health services and how those were impacted, and it was quite dramatic that 90% of countries that were surveyed came back and said that their essential health services were disrupted in one way or another, and the lower the income of the country, the more the impact. So 44% of lower middle income countries had severe or partial disruptions in at least 25 essential health services, including immunization, antenatal care, tuberculosis diagnosis and treatment, cancer treatment, essential surgery, blood transfusion services. All of those were affected. And so what that results in is really a setback to your other health needs of the population, people not getting diagnosis, not getting treatment in time, leading to definitely a negative health impact. And while many state governments really made efforts to try to fill that gap, it was for several months people were not able to get to health centers. Health centers were either closed or dealing only with COVID. And so we're going to see, for example, in tuberculosis, India normally has something like 2.2 million cases being notified every year to the central government, to the TB control program. And this number has been going up because the private sector has been also notifying cases. So you can see over the last few years, the notification for TB has been consistently going up. But this year, it's shown a dramatic decline of over 50%. And hopefully this will recover at some point. But that's an example. Patients who had suspected cancer, couldn't get their diagnosis on time and so on. So it's important for health systems really to also look at how do you maintain essential health services while dealing with an emergency. And then, of course, you have the non-health impact. And that is something as economists, as demographers and statisticians, you understand much better than I do. What's been the impact on livelihoods? The estimate that 100 million people just in India alone could be pushed into poverty, a lot of jobs lost, impact especially on girls and young women, both because they've had to do more of caring at home for the children who've been out of school, but also that in poor families, this may be the time when girls don't go back to school because they've been out of school now for several months, and that there's a higher chance of being trafficked. And there are already reports that the increase in trafficking of young women and girls. This is, I'm talking about globally. The impact on children who've been out of school. At one point, 1.6 billion children were out of school, but many countries prioritized school education and got their children back in school even while restrictions were placed on other activities. In India now, the schools are beginning slowly to open up, but certainly the impact on children has been more than just missing out on classes. It's for a child's physical, mental, and cognitive development, they need that environment. And for many children, the midday meal and just being away from, the family environment for some hours in a day is very, very important. And so we're going to see that all play out over the next couple of years, and there will be a period of catching up to do. So the projection, of course, is that the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, that there's been a massive setback, not only in the SDG for health, which is 3, but also in the other SDGs. So we will have to think about a concerted effort to overcome that. And that's where I think innovation, young people play a role, because we've seen the enormous innovations that had already been occurring. Our ecosystem for innovation had been growing, but the pandemic forced an acceleration, perhaps, and in some cases a leapfrogging. Take the example of digital. We do everything now virtually. Normally one would be thinking about my flying to Kolkata to deliver this lecture, and that would have made it quite difficult, and we would have had to negotiate a time and a date and so on, apart from, of course, adding to all the air miles of flying and adding to the global warming and so on. So some aspects are good. I think we are more efficient now. We get a lot done this way. Of course, meeting and personal interaction is a different feeling, and one needs that as well. You can't only be always on Zoom. It's very different to have that personal interaction. So that needs to continue for sure. But a lot of work can be done this way. A lot of healthcare now is being delivered through telemedicine, for example. So many parts of the country which lack specialist services can use telemedicine, and specialists who are sitting in cities, big hospitals or district hospitals, to provide their services to people who are in rural communities, maybe with having a health worker in between as an intermediary. And the e-Sanjeevani clinics have been trying to do that in India, and I understand that they're going to scale that up massively. So there have been some experiments that have happened which have enabled the leapfrogging and hopefully providing better quality health services. But at the same time, we have to remember that technology cannot solve all our problems. Technology is a tool that should be used with and under the guidance of humans in order to solve our problems. So we have to use them smartly. We have to see where they help us. But ultimately, we have to keep the goal in mind, which is for health is, of course, improving health outcomes of people. And so I think the last point I'd like to make is that rigorous monitoring and evaluation and research are really important and critical. And I think we need to learn how to be a learning system. We need to be constantly not just experimenting with new ideas and innovations, but learning from them. Some will be successful, some will not be so successful. And we need to make sure that we are self-critical, that we look at the evidence, that we look at how we can do things better and improve. And again, I'm thinking about health, but the same applies to other programs as well. You take education, there's a huge need to improve educational standards in schools and colleges across the country. Think about ways of doing that, of mentoring other people. Again, as young people, you can mentor people who are less fortunate, who have not had the exposure or the opportunities to have the kind of studies and the teachers and the facilities and infrastructure that you had. And a lot of people do want, to help. We need to find a way. And this is where I feel very encouraged when I see a lot of social entrepreneurship happening everywhere, and young people particularly with brilliant ideas on how you can actually crowdsource and make things better without necessarily having to invest a huge amount of money. So I think the idea of data would appeal to all of you, and the reason, the need for being data-driven, being science-driven and evidence-based. And again, I think that also needs to extend to scientific literacy in the community. And I think institutions like the Indian Statistical Institute, a very well-respected institution that has had many stalwarts and giants of statistics and demographics working in that institute. And India has a long tradition of statistics and data, and we need to maintain that. We need to ensure that we educate people, that people who understand the details of a particular discipline are able to communicate that in a way, and as I said, building up scientific literacy and health literacy so that people do not believe irrational beliefs, but rather focus on evidence-based and data-based communication and messaging. So that, again, is something that we as technical experts need to make a conscious effort to do more of and to do it better and to communicate in a language that people understand and appreciate. And it's a skill that can be built over a period of time. So I hope that, again, I'd like to congratulate all the graduating students. I'd like to congratulate their parents, who I'm sure are watching and are extremely proud of their sons and daughters. And I'd like to congratulate also Dr. Sangamitra, the director, the other directors of the Indian Statistical Institutes, the faculty and staff, and wish you a very, very good convocation. Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak to you. Bye-bye.
We are fortunate. We not only have a chief guest, we also have a guest of honor. The director has briefly introduced him. Peter John Bickel, professor of statistics at the University of California, Berkeley, probably one of the best departments of statistics anywhere in the world. He studied in Caltech. He went on to Berkeley, did extremely valuable work in multivariate analysis, robust statistics, and more recently on suspected gender bias at University of California, Berkeley, which has now got into textbooks. He's been awarded several prizes. One of them is the C.R. Rao and Bhargavi Rao Prize. He's published a lot. He is one of the leading statisticians of his time. And often I find it very interesting to read what triggered someone's interest in a particular subject. And in the case of Peter John Bickel, he wanted to be a scientist ever since he read the books of George Gamow. May I now request that the video address of Professor Peter Bickel be played.
It's a pleasure to return to the Indian Statistical Institute after 40 years. My last encounter here was on C.R. Rao's 60th birthday, I believe. I've had ties to India before that, and after that, of course. I shared an apartment with Ashok Mitra, who later became director of the ISI. And I also had two wonderful students from the ISI, Sharmati Bhattacharya and Shumendu Mukherjee. Okay, what I'd like to do is to present my view of statistics through my rather long life by now, and show you again how, in my eyes, it's evolved. So to begin with, there always have been two views of statistics. One as a mathematical science, and the second as a data science. The first, mathematical science, was basically what the emphasis was on during most of my career. Now I would say the emphasis is more on statistics as a data science. Actually, even at that time, there were different emphases at different times in different places. So in the United States, on the East Coast, Harvard and other places emphasized the data science. On the West Coast, I would say Stanford and Berkeley both emphasized theory. In India, I would say theory also was emphasized. In the UK, data science was definitely the dominant aspect. Well, okay, so as a mathematical science, I would say I've sort of arbitrarily divided it into three parts. First of all, a part which was long before I was born, and that was before 1900. And in that case, there was theory. In fact, the framework of probability theory developed, but it was inspired by data. So in the 18th century, you had Bernoulli, Laplace, and Bayes. In the 19th century, you had Quetelet in the social sciences, and Galton and Pearson in both to some extent. But there were many other figures. For example, Gauss played an important role in developing the method of least squares. If you're interested in this, I suggest you look at a wonderful book by Steve Stigler, The History of Statistics Before 1900. Now, the past, which of course covers part of my life, from 1900 to 1980. And I would say that the major figures were, of course, Fisher, who introduced the notions of population models, likelihood, and much else, followed by Neyman and Wald, who brought in the notions of decision theory, optimality. Of course, again, there were many, many more things happening. Fisher introduced, in addition to population models and likelihood, he introduced the notion of ANOVA, experimental design. Wald introduced the idea of sequential analysis. There are also many other people during and after World War II. C.R. Rao, of course, Hotelling, Tukey, Robbins, Höfting, Stein, Lehman, Lacombe, Anderson, Cox, and Bartlett, for example, and many more that I've undoubtedly missed. Now, the data part, I would say, is also in the past now. I'm not going to talk about the period before 1900. Was also different. Most of the data was survey, economical, and public policy data. agricultural data, some medical data, some technological data. The general features of this data were bodies of data were in general small, and the data structures were relatively simple. Now, again, I always have to emphasize that there was much more going on. For example, you might say that probability theory was basically prompted by gambling. Astronomy played a big role in the starts of statistics. And also, as far as small bodies of data, well, there were censuses, insurance data, clinical trials from the 1930s. So there was always more going on. In the theory, again, now in the past, which is up to 1980, the emphasis was on parametric models. One sample, two sample, linear models, log linear models, exponential distributions and models, in particular in the context of life and survival analysis. The notion of parameter, by the way, was introduced by R.A. Fisher, actually. And the whole notion of looking at statistics on the basis of a sample from a population and having a parameter which characterized the probability distribution of the population, that again really came primarily from Fisher. It's interesting to think back how unclear things were compared to the present. Of course, the present will presumably look unclear to the future also. Now, as far as the model's motivation goes, treatment versus control, of course, in, let's say, agricultural trials, regression, categorical data, like in the lady tasting tea, if you want, of Fisher, reliability data, time series data. The classes of probability distributions whose members formed the parametric models and were believed to generate the data, they could be described by low-dimensional Euclidean parameters, which involved the usual suspects as far as probability distributions goes: multivariate Gaussian, multinomial, logistic, exponential, and Poisson. Why? Largely as a matter of mathematical convenience and applicability. Also, really part of that period, certainly even from the very beginning, were the idea of non-parametric models and implicitly semi-parametric models. And these are obtained by sort of dropping the assumptions, right? You don't assume that things are necessarily Gaussian in a linear model. On dependence between covariates and response, so you don't assume that the responses are necessarily linear. And of course, on independence between the observations. You can assume, you can look at time series. Now, you cannot drop all assumptions. That's something I used to remember one of the first things I used to say in my theory classes, that the only form of data in which there are no assumptions is that you have n observations which have some joint distribution. And from that, you can't get anything. Now, non-parametric really means that you have an IID sample from one or more populations. Semi-parametric, I will talk about a bit later. Now, the questions that were considered very much were of three types: testing, estimation, and confidence regions. And the emphases of also on what was asked about procedures was on optimality in various ways. Bayes optimality, which was relatively simple if you had a Bayes prior. The decision theoretic point of view, where you start to get more things like minimax and unbiasedness. And in all of these, an important factor was to somehow measure model-based variability. Again, this was sort of limited. There were prediction tolerance regions. Sequential methods were also discussed. Bayes was a catch-all. It included subjective Bayes, but it also included empirical Bayes, mixture of Bayes and frequentist and so on. Even robustness, which I'll talk about a little bit more later, came about very early. So, for example, in the 18th century, trimmed means were used to characterize average yields of wheat, let's say, in France. And then, of course, there was always the issue of simplicity. If things were not simple, you couldn't understand them. So, as I said, the approaches involved exact distributions, insofar as possible. Fisher spent a good bit of time deriving the T distribution. The F distribution was actually, I think, also involved others. However, it was very clear that exact distributions could not be obtained in many cases, and very quickly the focus was on asymptotic methods as the sample size tended to infinity, but these were viewed as approximations. So, for example, to say that n is when you never get to n equals infinity, of course you never get to n equals infinity, but as an approximation, the expression could be perfectly valid and good enough. Now, I like to think of my own career as sort of split in a funny way, thinking of asymptotics. So I started out looking at second-order asymptotics, which were approximations to order 1 over n of distributions. Then I moved to first-order asymptotics, which is what most people looked at, where you have limit laws with scale 1 over the square root of n. But now, and at least in the recent past, I've focused on zeroth-order asymptotics, which is, the critical thing is bias, because the model is undoubtedly not correct. Now we move to the present. So in the present, data has changed in scale primarily. And why has it changed? Because we have computers and sensors. The computers mean that you have easy storage, you can gather the data, you can process the data in very large amounts. You can have large bodies of data. Sensors are, in fact, what are used to gather the data. You have things like, at Berkeley, for a while, it was, people talked about smart dust, which were little tiny sensors which would sort of send messages to central stations. Then you have more common things which we don't necessarily think of as sensors, like tomography, which again produces large, very complicated data sets. Social data, which was always present, but again is ballooned. And finally, you have enormous amounts of data coming, for example, from the human genome, where you have 3 billion base pairs. But then, of course, these are described in terms of all sorts of things called omes. There's the genome, of course, but there's a transcriptome, and there's the metabolome, and all of these add complications and structure to the data. They're always complex data structures. The theory has, because of that, really, since nobody really has a very clear idea of how to try to describe these in any very, very compact and simple way, it's focused on non- and semi-parametric models, but the probability spaces that one thinks about are very complex, like random distributions on images, or represented in terms of probability distributions on high-dimensional function spaces. And the methods have mirrored the models. You have neural nets, reinforcement learning, and all sorts of different learnings, if you want, which involve huge data sets and very complex procedures for analyzing. The questions or the emphases have changed very much. Perhaps the most striking difference in emphasis has been on prediction. And the advantage of prediction is that it is possible to somehow validate your methods without somehow gathering new data necessarily, or having new data handy, without running new experiments. And of course, it's become very important commercially, because the prediction has become a mainstay of most technological companies. The criteria, the decision theoretic, but again, the emphasis on new data. Another emphasis has been on multiple comparisons. You want to make many conclusions from the same data, since there's so much of it, and many decisions are made simultaneously, and so you have to think about multiple comparisons. Then an old issue has become emphasized, the issue of causation. We've always focused on correlation between variables, but in fact, of course, what we really want is causation. As Hume showed a long time ago, you cannot actually prove causation, but in practical terms, you can try to intervene and to extrapolate and have useful results. And then again, a completely new thing, an emphasis on convergence of algorithms. because now methods are described in terms of usually iterative algorithms. And the optimization theory has played a role in these as well. Now, the approaches have also apparently changed. There are now, for example, non-asymptotic guarantees, which are basically worst case bounds for the situation as you've modeled it non-parametrically. And these guarantees are on statistical properties, decision theoretic, but also on algorithm performance and convergence. Now, what is non-asymptotic? All it is asymptotics with worst case constants specified. To do asymptotics, you have to have bounds. But the constants have been long known to be useless because they're too big. But the structure of the bounds give clues to the importance of the ingredients, the sample size, the dimension, and now, of course, tuning constants. The other big new aspect, if you want, again coming from the computer, is Monte Carlo and all sorts of things based on Monte Carlo, and combined with that is the idea of sample splitting as being crucial. Again, you can only do that when you have very large samples. All right, I'd like to now also talk a little bit about my view of the future. Probability has already moved to the center of mathematics, which it was not when I started. There were probabilists in math departments, but they were usually on the fringes. Now, there have been field medals which involve probability theory, and what's also happened is that there are very strong interactions with statistical physics and with theoretical computer science. In statistics, the strong interactions of probability have continued, but there are also other parts of data science. Machine learning, artificial intelligence, data structures, all of these play a big role. Computational issues have arisen, as I mentioned before, and skills are intrinsic. Construction of algorithms, convergence of algorithms, computation time. And finally, and what I found most interesting, are the appearance of strong interactions with substantive fields in almost all areas. So, to summarize, statistics in the past was small, and at the present it's large and complex. I might also mention passing, I mentioned statistical physics in connection with probability theory, but of course it's also had a big impact on statistical practice, because the most successful algorithms of statistics, the Gibbs sampler, the Metropolis algorithm, mean field methods, all came from statistical physics. So that's a course that should have been included in my education and wasn't. Now, what are hot theory areas? Because I would guess that most people at the ISI will go in that direction, though not all. Large complex data sets, as I mentioned. Analyzing deep learning phenomena. For example, the possible disappearance of sparsity as an issue in prediction. Now, what is sparsity? Sparsity has appeared as a way of dealing with very high dimensional data sets with very high numbers of parameters. Basically, whenever you try to fit those naively, you get what's called overfitting, which means that you basically are fine with the data you have, but worthless at prediction. However, it turns out that neural nets behave in funny ways, and overfitting seems to be much less of a problem. A starting point for this study is videos of lectures at various programs in the Simons Institute, which you can look at online. The second aspect, which is far less settled, is interpretable conclusions from methods achieving excellent prediction. The methods which achieve excellent prediction are things like deep learning and so on, which basically achieve good prediction or excellent prediction, but without really understanding why. There's also present smallish data sets, and that's where, if you want intermediate data sets, where causation issues play a role. And finally, there's a general point I would like to stress, that theory is combined with practice for large data sets in many fields, in particular in one which I've gotten very interested in my later years, molecular biology. When you work on part C, so to speak, what you need is to learn the language and share the interests of the people in the substantive science that you're working with. Now, let me just briefly pause and talk about what you should gain from your studies in statistics. Of course, you will gain models and techniques in mathematics and data analysis. You will also, and that's a very important point, make friends to collaborate with and otherwise. But perhaps the major thing is something that should come to you already, and if it hasn't, you should learn it, is how to think statistically, which means that you accept randomness in formulating models and ideas. You want to realize and analyze the dependence of your conclusions on your assumptions. And finally, you want to measure uncertainty in some way without forgetting dependence on assumptions. These are philosophical issues as much as statistical. And I actually hit them rather early on in my a major applied paper, my only paper in science, towards the start of my career. How it occurred was accidental, but let me just mention it. There's a paper on sex bias in graduate admissions, where it appeared from a simple analysis of male-female acceptance denial ratios in the university that there was considerable bias in favor of males. However, admissions at Berkeley are done department by department. And then when people started to look for the guilty departments, they couldn't find any. And the reason was, in some sense, you could view it as a purely theoretical one. There's a tremendous difference between independence and conditional independence. So there was conditional independence, but not independence. Why? Because it turned out at that time, women were going to the departments which were hard to get into. You have a bright future, I think, in statistics, in academia, statisticians, data scientists, computer scientists, the social sciences, economists, psychologists, business school, public policy, sociology, anthropology, in the biosciences, molecular biology, genetics, integrative biology, neuroscience, epidemiology, biostatistics, in the engineering and physical sciences, even in history and philosophy. There are, of course, very much closer relations to industry than there were in the past. There are partial or full positions in tech companies and finance. The key point to draw from this long list is that labels will not matter much, that's one. And the other, which is not so apparent from this, is that work is now very much done in teams. And now, finally, having gone over this very quick view of my views and, to some extent, my life, I wish you all good luck.
May I now request the director to start presenting the award of degrees and diplomas.
Sir, I have the honor to present before you the candidates for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy and pray that they may be admitted to the degree of Doctor of Philosophy in recognition of their contributions to the advancement of statistics, mathematics, quantitative economics, computer science, as well as quality, reliability, and operations research.
By virtue of the authority vested in me by the Council of the Indian Statistical Institute, I admit you to the degree of Doctor of Philosophy in recognition of your contributions to the advancement of statistics, mathematics, quantitative economics, computer science, as well as quality, reliability, and operations research, and charge you that in thought, word, and action you show yourselves worthy of the degree.
Shumon Sharkar in statistics under the supervision of Professor Atanu Vishwas of ISI Kolkata. Arnab Chakraborty, statistics under the supervision of Dr. Rituparna Sen, ISI Bangalore at this point. Shumon Guho in statistics under Dr. Saurabh Bhattacharya, ISI Kolkata. Angshuman Roy in statistics under Professor Anil Kumar Ghosh of ISI Kolkata. Biltu Dan in mathematics under Dr. Rajat Shubra Hajra, ISI Kolkata. Shukrit Chakraborty in Mathematics under Dr. Rajat Shubro Hajra, ISI Kolkata, and Dr. Orijit Chakraborty, also of ISI Kolkata. Prachi Singh in Quantitative Economics under Professor Obhirup Mukhopadhyay, ISI Delhi. Priyanka Kothari in Quantitative Economics under Professor Prabal Roy Choudhury, ISI Delhi. Soumyarup Sadhukha in Quantitative Economics under Dr. Shobhik Roy, ISI Kolkata. Aditya Bhan in Quantitative Economics under Professor Torun Kobiraj, ISI Kolkata. Dripto Bokshi in Quantitative Economics under Professor Indranil Dasgupta of ISI Kolkata. Abhijit Datta in Computer Science under Dr. Mridul Nondi, ISI Kolkata. Manjari Pradhan in Computer Science under Professor Bhargav Bhattacharya, retired professor from ISI Kolkata. Payal Sadhuka in Computer Science under Dr. Sharbani Palit, ISI Kolkata. Rishika Sen in Computer Science under Professor Rajat Kumar De, ISI Kolkata. Sanchayan Shatra in Computer Science under Professor Bhabatosh Chando, ISI Kolkata. Shankha Shubhra Mollik in Computer Science under Dr. Shagotam Das, ISI Kolkata. Mona Lisa Pal in Computer Science under my supervision, Shanghamitra Bandopadhyay. Tonujit Chakraborty in Quality, Reliability and Operations Research under Dr. Ashish Kumar Chakraborty, ISI Kolkata. T.R. Lalita in Quality, Reliability and Operations Research under Dr. G.S.R. Murthy of ISI Hyderabad. Sir, I have the honor to present before you the candidates for the degree of Master of Technology in Computer Science on their having completed the prescribed course of training at the Institute and having passed the qualifying examination, and pray that they may be admitted to the degree of Master of Technology in Computer Science.
By virtue of the authority vested in me by the Council of the Indian Statistical Institute, I confer on you the degree of Master of Technology in Computer Science in recognition of your having completed the prescribed course of training and having passed the qualifying examination, and charge you that in thought, word and action you show yourselves worthy of the degree.
Shomi Guho. Rishabh Gupta. Ravi Shukla. Spandan Basu. Ankon Kumar Das. Harish Ganesan. Yashasvi Tripathi. Adarsh Chandrasekhar. Shankhadeep De. Soumya Sarkel. Saurabh Saha. Rahul Gautam. Shahansa Salim. Debam Kumar Das. Sushant Sharad Moon. Arpun Kumar Bagh. Sanchari Shil. Anjan Giri. There is no restriction on clapping, please. Laltu Roy. Thank you very much. Naveen Ojha. Manish Kumar. Arnab Shaha. Aritra Kumar Bhaduri. Shashank Saurabh Bhavishya. Sheikh Shakil Akhtar. Rishabh Chaurasia. Sir, I have the honor to present before you the candidates for the degree of Master of Technology in Cryptology and Security on their having completed the prescribed course of training at the Institute and having passed the qualifying examination, and pray that they may be admitted to the degree of Master of Technology in Cryptology and Security.
By virtue of the authority vested in me by the Council of the Indian Statistical Institute, I confer on you the degree of Master of Technology in Cryptology and Security in recognition of your having completed the prescribed course of training and having passed the qualifying examination, and charge you that in thought, word and action you show yourselves worthy of the degree.
Shoumita Da. Bibhash Chandra Das. Ravi Teja Vadaddi. Nattam Lokesh. Shaborno Hajra. Arun Aditya Annadurai. Saurabh Sarkar. Swarnodip Bhattacharya. Priyobroto Mondol. Sir, I have the honor to present before you the candidates for the degree of Master of Technology in Quality, Reliability and Operations Research on their having completed the prescribed course of training at the Institute and having passed the qualifying examination, and pray that they may be admitted to the degree of Master of Technology in Quality, Reliability and Operations Research.
By virtue of the authority vested in me by the Council of the Indian Statistical Institute, I confer on you the degree of Master of Technology in Quality, Reliability and Operations Research in recognition of your having completed the prescribed course of training and having passed the qualifying examination, and charge you that in thought, word and action you show yourselves worthy of the degree.
Ritik Bishas. সৌমিক পাল, নীলাঞ্জন চৌধুরী, প্রতীক দাস, সৌমিত্র মণ্ডল, অতনু চক্রবর্তী, অরিজিৎ চ্যাটার্জি, কৌস্তব সেনগুপ্ত, নিশান্ত শর্মা, অর্পণ হাজরা, তমজিৎ মাইতি, প্রশান্ত আগরওয়াল, সুদীপ্ত চ্যাটার্জি, গৌতম কুমার ঝা, অর্পণ মিশ্র, দেবারুণ দেব, दीपक कुमार गुप्ता, सनी दयाल, অরিত্র বিশ্বাস, জয় ঘোষ, Sir, I have the honor to present before you the candidates for the degree of Master of Statistics on their having completed the prescribed course of training at the Institute and having passed the qualifying examination, and pray that they may be admitted to the degree of Master of Statistics.
By virtue of the authority vested in me by the Council of the Indian Statistical Institute, I confer on you the degree of Master of Statistics in recognition of your having completed the prescribed course of training and having passed the qualifying examination, and charge you that in thought, word and action you show yourselves worthy of the degree.
Specialization in Theoretical Statistics, Promit Dash, অন্বেষা চক্রবর্তী, রশ্মি রঞ্জন ভূঁয়া, সিদ্ধার্থ সরকার, দাদি ভেঙ্কট সাই নবীন, অরিত্র ব্যানার্জি, বিলোল ব্যানার্জি, বুধাদিত্য সেন শর্মা, কুশাঙ্কুর দত্ত, Specialization in Applied Statistics in the area of Biostatistics, Shimyon De, Shoumi Sarkar, Specialization in Applied Statistics in the area of Finance, Shayantan Basu, অনন্যা রায়, निखिल सचदेवा, नितेश कुमार कंसारा, पूनम घोष, सुलग्ना घोष, अद्दाला जितेंद्र साई वीरेश, पारमिता पॉल, प्रियांश अग्रवाल, Specialization in Applied Statistics in the area of Computational Statistics, Shaptarshi Chakraborty, Alokesh Manna, Anjan Ghosh, Oitik Dotto, Rohit Karar, Debangshu Ari, Anupam Sheet, Akash Mondal, Sanchayan Shamanto, Shayantan Das, Somnath Mondal, Muppidi Vishwas, Mriganko Alia, Subject of Specialization Probability, Anirban Chatterjee, Obhinav Chakraborty, Rohan Hor, Shayantan Chaudhuri, Deborshi Das, Bodhisattva Das, Sir, I have the honor to present before you the candidates for the degree of Master of Mathematics on their having completed the prescribed course of training at the Institute and having passed the qualifying examination, and pray that they may be admitted to the degree of Master of Mathematics.
By virtue of the authority vested in me by the Council of the Indian Statistical Institute, I confer on you the degree of Master of Mathematics in recognition of your having completed the prescribed course of training and having passed the qualifying examination, and charge you that in thought, word and action you show yourselves worthy of the degree.
Srijan Das, Ipsit Chopra, Orgho Chongdar, Orkomouli Debnath, Orkojit Pal Chaudhuri, Utshav Devan, Bappa Ghosh, Sarbojit De, Parvez Rasool, সৌমিক ঘোষ, রুম্পা মাসান্তা, সৌমিত পাল, সায়ক চক্রবর্তী, রবি দ্বিবেদী, Sir, I have the honor to present before you the candidates for the degree of Master of Science in Quantitative Economics on their having completed the prescribed course of training at the Institute and having passed the qualifying examination, and pray that they may be admitted to the degree of Master of Science in Quantitative Economics.
By virtue of the authority vested in me by the Council of the Indian Statistical Institute, I confer on you the degree of Master of Science in Quantitative Economics in recognition of your having completed the prescribed course of training and having passed the qualifying examination, and charge you that in thought, word and action you show yourselves worthy of the degree.
সৌম্যদীপ লাহিড়ী, रोहित अग्रवाल, अनिंदिता दास, श्रेया भड़, आकांक्षा शर्मा, अंकिता मंडल, प्रज्ञा बांथिया, मेघना सिन्हा राय, अभिनव सिंघल, आशीष गौरव, करण कुमार, ऋषभ कुमार गुप्ता, सैफुल इस्लाम, अरविंद कुमार मावलिया, Sir, I have the honor to present before you the candidates for the degree of Master of Science in Library and Information Science on their having completed the prescribed course of training at the Institute and having passed the qualifying examination, and pray that they may be admitted to the degree of Master of Science in Library and Information Science.
By virtue of the authority vested in me by the Council of the Indian Statistical Institute, I confer on you the degree of Master of Science in Library Information Science in recognition of your having completed the prescribed course of training and having passed the qualifying examination, and charge you that in thought, word and action you show yourselves worthy of the degree.
Devanjali Bain, Gokul R, Jyotima Patel, Vaishak Babu, Sir, I have the honor to present before you the candidates for the degree of Master of Science in Quality Management Science on their having completed the prescribed course of training at the Institute and having passed the qualifying examination, and pray that they may be admitted to the degree of Master of Science in Quality Management Science.
By virtue of the authority vested in me by the Council of the Indian Statistical Institute, I confer on you the degree of Master of Science in Quality Management Science in recognition of your having completed the prescribed course of training and having passed the qualifying examination, and charge you that in thought, word and action you show yourselves worthy of the degree.
Arihant Singhi, Orijit Bhattacharya, Girish Kumar Chandora, Nilanjan Poddar, Parthosarathi Das, Promit Samanto, Sai Krishna D, Shauni Das, Saurabh Bardhan, Sridipta Manna, Shubha Bhuiya, Sir, I have the honor to present before you the candidates for the degree of Bachelor of Statistics Honours on their having completed the prescribed course of training at the Institute and having passed the qualifying examination, and pray that they may be admitted to the degree of Bachelor of Statistics Honours.
By virtue of the authority vested in me by the Council of the Indian Statistical Institute, I admit you to the degree of Bachelor of Statistics Honours in recognition of your having completed the prescribed course of training and having passed the qualifying examination, and charge you that in thought, word and action you show yourselves worthy of the degree.
Riddhiman Shaha, Shoham Das, Urchi De, Dibyendu Shaha, Bhaskar Ray, Shomak Laha, Anirban Nath, Shayok Chatterjee, Bitan Sarkar, Ribhu Bonik, Shauhardo Sengupto, Onik Burman, Aditya Ghosh, Anjali, Shoham Ghosh, Anubhav Mondal, Muntasir Sheikh, Arjama Das, Ratnodip Bain, Diganta Bhattacharya, Shomik Mondal, Shauhardo Ray, Tamogno Gupta, Shobhik Mohanto, Ranojoy Dotto, সৌভিক মিদ্দে, মধুমিতা নন্দী, Sir, I have the honor to present before you the candidates for the degree of Bachelor of Mathematics Honours on their having completed the prescribed course of training at the Institute and having passed the qualifying examination, and pray that they may be admitted to the degree of Bachelor of Mathematics Honours.
By virtue of the authority vested in me by the Council of the Indian Statistical Institute, I admit you to the degree of Bachelor of Mathematics Honours in recognition of your having completed the prescribed course of training and having passed the qualifying examination, and charge you that in thought, word and action you show yourselves worthy of the degree.
Abhiram K, Dheeraj D, Karmesh Agarwal, Parth Prashant Karnawat, Prashant Bajpai, Siddharth Gopal Krishna Nayak, Shoumobroto Kundu, Suhas Vadan Gondi, Gohin Maiti, Neeraj Balachandran Nair, Paramita Udhikari, Doipayon Sarkar. Sir, I have the honor to present before you the candidates for the Diploma of Postgraduate in Statistical Methods and Analytics on their having completed the prescribed course of training at the Institute and having passed the qualifying examination, and pray that they may be admitted to the Diploma of Postgraduate in Statistical Methods and Analytics.
By virtue of the authority vested in me by the Council of the Indian Statistical Institute, I admit you to the Diploma of Postgraduate in Statistical Methods and Analytics in recognition of your having completed the prescribed course of training and having passed the qualifying examination, and charge you that in thought, word and action you show yourselves worthy of the diploma.
Abhishek Bhatia, Onurima De, Avnish Kumar, Bishal Shaha, Karishma Chand, Roshan Kumar Shah, Shahid Ahmed Chaudhary, Shreyoshi Dev, Sumedha, Drishtant Nirola, Gunjan Nandi, Harshajyoti Das, Ujjwal Sarkar, Shyamolendu Manna, Shubham Soni, Aryan Paritosh, Sir, I have the honor to present before you the candidates for the Diploma of Postgraduate in Computer Applications on their having completed the prescribed course of training at the Institute and having passed the qualifying examination, and pray that they may be admitted to the Diploma of Postgraduate in Computer Applications.
By virtue of the authority vested in me by the Council of the Indian Statistical Institute, I admit you to the Diploma of Postgraduate in Computer Applications in recognition of your having completed the prescribed course of training and having passed the qualifying examination, and charge you that in thought, word, and action you show yourselves worthy of the diploma.
Purnima Kumari, Kanchan Kumari, Sir, I have the honor to place before you the names of all the candidates for degrees and diplomas listed in the citation who could not present themselves today, and pray that they may be admitted to the respective degrees and diplomas.
By virtue of the authority vested in me by the Council of the Indian Statistical Institute, I award them the respective degrees and diplomas in absentia in recognition of their having passed the qualifying examinations, and charge them that in thought, word, and action they show themselves worthy of the degrees and diplomas. May I now request the Chairman of the ISI Council, Dr. Lahiri, to start presenting the prizes and medals.
ISI Alumni Association, Mrs. M.R. Iyer Memorial Gold Medals to outstanding students of the Institute. Of B-Stat Honors, Aditya Ghosh. MTech in QR and OR, Kaustubh Sengupta. ISI Alumni Association J.K. Ghosh Memorial Gold Medals for outstanding performance in MStat program. Abhinav Chakraborty. ISI Alumni Association P.C. Panesar Gold Medal for outstanding performance in M-Math program. Shomik Ghosh. Nikhilesh Bhattacharya Memorial Gold Medal for the best performance in statistics in B-Stat Honors program. Aditya Ghosh. Ushri Gangopadhyay Memorial Medal for the best female student in B-Stat Honors program. Urchi De. Mukul Chaudhuri Cash Award as the best female student in B-Stat Honors second year batch. Tanishtha Mondol. PCM Gold Medal as the most outstanding student in MStat program. Abhinav Chakraborty. Shobhoshachi Roy Memorial Gold Medals for the best project work in second year of MSTAT program, Ananya Rai. Dr. N.S. Iyengar Award for the Best Student of Econometrics, Shreya Bhaur. To name the research fellows who have been awarded PhD degree by academic bodies other than ISI for work done in ISI with ISI fellowship, Shoumen Majhi, who got his degree from University of Calcutta and worked under Dr. Dibakar Ghosh of ISI Kolkata. And research fellows and personnel who have been awarded PhD degree by academic bodies other than ISI for work done in ISI, Moumita Patro from the University of Calcutta under Dr. Shantanu Maiti of ISI Kolkata, Madhumita Shaha, University of Calcutta under Dr. Shantanu Maiti, Shormishtha Das, University of Calcutta under Indranil Mukhopadhyay of ISI Kolkata, and Shubhradev Roy of at Jadavpur University under Dr. Pradeep Bhattacharya, ISI Giridih.
May I now request the Dean of Studies to give the vote of thanks.
Shri Vivek Debroy, President, Indian Statistical Institute, and the Chairman of the Economic Advisory Council of the Prime Minister of India, Dr. Ashok Kumar Lahiri, Chairman of the ISI Governing Council and Member, 15th Finance Commission, Director, Indian Statistical Institute, distinguished guests and colleagues, many of whom are watching this ceremony being live streamed, students, ladies and gentlemen, this is my pleasant duty and proud privilege to offer the vote of thanks at this ceremony. I express my sincerest thanks to our President, Shri Vivek Debroy, for his enlightening welcome address, presiding over the entire function and awarding various degrees. We are grateful to you, sir, for being present among us in this solemn occasion and reminding the students of the meaning of Dharma, and look forward to your continued support and guidance. We are especially delighted to have Dr. Ashok Kumar Lahiri among us to grace the occasion. Thank you, sir, for being with us today, addressing the students and giving away the prizes and medals. We look forward to you for your help, support, and guidance in future. We are grateful to Dr. Swaminathan, Chief Scientist, World Health Organization, for delivering a pre-recorded convocation address. The address gave us a lot of insight into how the COVID pandemic was handled by the WHO and various governments and what may be expected in future. I am sure the graduating students and scholars will draw inspiration not only from her words but also from her life and work. We cannot thank enough Professor Peter John Bickel of the Department of Statistics, University of California, Berkeley, for addressing the graduating students and scholars through a pre-recorded video message. Many of those in the audience, myself included, have learned mathematical statistics from his book. It was indeed special, particularly on this occasion, to listen to his views on how statistics has evolved over the years and where it is headed currently. I thank Professor Sanghamitra Bandyopadhyay, the director, and Professor Dipti Prasad Mukherjee, the deputy director, for helping the Dean's office in numerous ways to organize this function. My special thanks to Brigadier J.N. Pandey, Chief Executive, Administration and Finance, for helping in all administrative arrangements required for organizing today's event, which required special care because of the prevailing pandemic. On behalf of the Dean's office, I acknowledge with thanks all help and cooperation that the Dean's office received from all the faculty members from various scientific units and administrative staff members of the Director's Office, Chief Executive's Office, Estate Office, electrical maintenance unit, engineering unit, reprography unit, audiovisual unit, public relations unit, binding unit, guest house, ISI Workers Organization, and ISI Club. I thank the library and the Computer and Statistical Service Center for going the extra mile to assist the Dean's Office in arranging this function. I wholeheartedly thank the staff members of the housekeeping agency and gardeners who had put on hard work to keep our campus clean and beautiful. I express my sincerest thanks to all staff members of the Dean's Office, without whose untiring endeavors it would not have been possible to organize today's ceremony. I thank different media personnel for their coverage of our convocation. My special thanks to all students for your enthusiastic participation, both physical and online. Finally, my hearty congratulations to all the recipients of various degrees and awards for their academic achievements, and wish them glowing success in every sphere of life. Thank you all once again.
I declare the 55th Convocation of the Indian Statistical Institute closed.
Please rise for the National Anthem. After the anthem, everyone is requested to remain standing to allow the academic procession to leave the arena. Please stay behind for a few announcements as well.
जनगणमनयधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंधु गुजरात मराठा द्राविड़ उत्कल बंग विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्छल जलधि तरंग तब शुभ नामे जागे तब शुभ आशीष मागे गाहे तब जय गाथा जनगण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे।
May I have your attention, please? All awardees are requested to go to the 7th floor of SN Bosch Bhavan for lunch. The packets will be distributed from room 700. Please take the stairs if you can. Those who cannot, please use the lift, but do not crowd it. Please collect your mark sheet after returning your gown in room 508 between 3 p.m. and 5:30 p.m. Do not violate safety norms under any condition. You may access convocation photographs from the ISI website today, 5 p.m. onward. Thank you very much.